Diaz Gunners Collective TV. Back at it? You already know. Like a motherfucking smack addict. Bye up. Bye up. In a menudo style in direct fashion, we're going to get straight into the content of the day. But before we do, let's hit that like and subscribe button. Ding. Put your notification bell on all so that way you're directing the direction of the dope content that I'm kicking. And I highly appreciate all the support. We're going up on this channel. It's all because of you. And for that, I can say I'm very humbled and very much so appreciative. Gracias. Boom. So here we go. Rumor. Look at all these rumors surrounding us rumors, homie. Right? And there's a big rumor going on. And I can say it's a rumor because I got at the right individuals and dispelled the rumor. So I'm going to put it out there right now. So the rumor that was going around is that the Fresno Bulldogs, the Perro Chatos, are functioning within the Fresno County Jail with Northern Riders. Right now, let me tell you right now. First of all, I know dogs, right? And the Bulldogs consider themselves very active. Okay, they are a group that doesn't answer to anyone. They are very independent in what they do. They've been that way since the Red Wave, since their extraction from the Norteño cause. The Bulldogs have functioned on their yards and have maintained their yards. Every time the Bulldogs touch ground on a yard that's even connected with the Southerner or a Northerner, they get off or they get offed on, right? It's just what it is. So to sit here and say that the Bulldogs are allowing or accepting Northern Riders in their county jail to function in their pods is ludicrous, right? In fact, it'd be befuddled me. That's the word of the day, befuddled. I was befuddled, but I had to tap in with some dogs to find out exactly what was going on. So I did. I made a couple phone calls, made a couple power moves wearing shower shoes because my antennas were definitely up. And from what I'm hearing in the Fresno County Jail is that there are Northern Riders present. There are Northern Riders present, but they have their own pod. They're not programming nor functioning with the Bulldogs. Now, it's been said for a long time within the state system, why wouldn't the Bulldogs join up with a dropout gang, right? Because they're at odds and have enemies, or their enemies basically are active Norteños and active Sureños, right? Why wouldn't they? You know, hey, the more the merrier. These are two groups, the Bulldogs and the Riders, that definitely have common enemies. And you know what they say? If you have the same enemies, then you can become a friend. Lightweight. But this is not the case. And I'm going to explain to you why it's not the case and why it was just a rumor that was going around. Because the Bulldogs are still considered an active security threat group, right? A disruptive group. They cannot by any means function with a dropout group or a gang that's considered dropouts. Now, I know a lot of the Northern Riders like to say that they're active Norteño Riders, and I understand where that's coming from. There's a lot. See, in the beginning, it was formed and fabricated on these SNY dropout yards. There was a lot of Northern Riders that got put on, guys that, you know, were at odds with their former gang, or guys that felt some type of way. They got done dirty politicked on. So they started functioning together. And of course, we know Snoop, Badass Snoop, is the one who implemented the Northern Rider name, the title, and a lot of youngsters ran with it. In fact, the Northern Rider group was probably the largest ever, fastest growing group in California a few years ago. That kind of slowed down. Okay, that kind of slowed down because now with the integration of the yards, you know, they are who they are, the Norteños who are who they are, and everyone's just going to do what they do. But there was a lot of young Norteños that started functioning as Northern Riders on the streets prior to even being incarcerated. Because Northern Riders started to get out and spread their influence and their gospel, Billy Graham style, on the streets, and a lot of guys started to become recruited. So you did have a lot of guys that never went into protective custody or never were on SNY yards, who were actually considering themselves active Norteño Riders. There were, and I repeat, there were a lot of guys that literally signed off their chronos to go back to the general population yards. I never seen it with my own eyes, but this is what I was being told, and this is what was going on. Still, the group as a whole is considered a protective custody gang, no matter how you want to slice it or dice it. No disrespect to the Northern Riders. I respect what they got going on, but at the same time, you got to understand that the Bulldogs will look at it the same way and are looking at it the same way. There's no way as an active group with respect, regardless if they're oppositions with North and South and whoever they're opposed to, they still are an active group within the California Department of Corrections system. So there's no way they could function with a prison group that's considered a PC gang. It just isn't going to work out in their benefit. Anytime you function with someone who's non-active or someone who's not on the righteous general population yard, then you are who you flock with. If you function on them yards together, then you're just like them. Now, I know a lot of you say, well, the Bulldogs play by their own rules. They can do whatever they want to do. And in fact, that's righteous. They can do what they want to do. And I'm sure in some isolated situations, there have been Bulldogs and even Northern Riders to that effect that have utilized each other to go against the common enemy. But as far as functioning together, working hand in hand and coming together as two groups, that I don't think will ever happen. I think the Bulldogs have more of a chance of going back to the Norte before they do a function with Northern Riders. Now, someone had called me and told me, hey, bro, I just got out of the Fresno County Jail. And in fact, they do have Northern Riders and Bulldogs in the same pods together and they're kicking it. So immediately before putting out that video and just jumping the gun, I did my homework, and that's why I tapped in and made phone calls. And I talked to some real righteous perro chatos because I have connects with some real Bulldogs out of the 559 area. And they told me that that was bullshit. There's not Bulldogs kicking it with Northern Riders. That, in fact, one of the homeboys was there in a county jail pod, and they did try to bring two Northern Riders into the pod, and they got mopped up quick, right? Because the way the Bulldogs see Northern Riders is norteños, period. Because you got to understand, when the Northern Rider cause first started, that's why they had the name Northern Riders. They still were holding on, like in Vogue, to that Northern plight. They still were holding on to that Northern title. Okay, once you drop out, once you're no longer good anymore, no longer able to function on the general population yard within that movement, the Norteño movement, you cease to be a Norteño. Now, I know in your heart and in your mind, you're always going to be what you are, right? But the way that the active homies look at it is that you are no longer in good standings. You are erased from the roster. You are a target, okay? Period. Plain and simple. So when the Northern Riders were formed, of course, they still had that burning fire, that Norteño movement in their heart, yet they were something entirely different. Their enemy now was the same cause they once represented. Now, along the way, they morphed into a little something different, and they started to fight amongst other gangs like 2-5ers, independent riders, and so on and so forth, right? But the gist of the whole situation was Northern Riders were basically defects from the Norteño cause and did not like Norteños at all. Let me tell you a story. When I was in Tracy as an active Norteño man, this is when the Northern Riders started to get deeper. The first time I was in Tracy prison, the Norteños had the majority of the prison. East Hall, West Hall, J-Wing, H-Wing, E-Wing, K-Wing definitely was a Norteño stronghold, which was the oil. Tracy was predominantly a Northern Hispanic prison. Okay, there were Southsiders there. They had one building. And then, of course, you had the degenerates or the dropouts who had certain sections. And you would never really hear them talk. In fact, they were handcuffed when they were escorted anywhere to medical, to chow. And Norteños basically weren't handcuffed. Well, years later, after doing a term, I come back. I get out of Corcoran prison. I end up doing a violation, still functioning and active. And when I come back, times have changed. Things have changed. The Northern Riders are basically the deepest in Tracy at this time. They had parts of J-Wing, parts of H-Wing. It had now flipped, okay? And I remember distinctly when the homeboys used to do their gallo or their program shutdown, the Northern Riders used to yell and scream over them, saying busters and this, and a lot of disrespectful, derogatory terms. And it blew my mind that a lot of these dudes that still had XIVs, 14s, Norteño movement all over them, tattoos that indicated that Huelga birds, would do that. That was their thing. They were bumping baking soda breath on the door. Not all of them, but some of them. And I thought that was very unbecoming of anyone from Northern California to do that, because we weren't raised that way, educated or indoctrinated that way. But that's what was going on, right? And they used to scream over the program shutdown, and it was nuts. It was crazy, right? It was a big zoo there. But it was what it was. The Northern Riders started to take in a lot of members, and they started to become deep. That just was the movement. Times had changed. So like I said, their whole first thing was going against other Norteños, going against the actives. Then over time, I went and did another term. This is when I fell off, when I was no longer in good standings. And I went back to Tracy on a violation, and I'm sitting around looking, and I'm watching how people are conducting themselves and how they're functioning. And I seen that the Northern Riders started to holler out words like active, and they started to get a little bit more structured and program a little bit differently. And I always noticed this, and I wondered if things were going to flip, if general population was going to become the lesser than and the ones that are escorted, and if these guys were going to become the new mainline. It was just something in my mind, right? Now, that never happened, but it's getting close. The riders are definitely deep. The 2-5ers, all these other groups are definitely deep. And it's come to the point where now North and South has not clicked up, but they basically get off on dudes on these integrated yards when they pull up. Now, Bulldogs have always been something different entirely. They're independent of everyone. They go at it with everyone. They did not engage in the end of hostilities. They did not conform to that. They've always said anybody can get it. They're going to do what they do. They're going to bark it till they spark it. It's just how it is. Now, for someone to say that the Northern Riders and the Bulldogs are coming together, that's bullshit. But I will say this. I did hear rumors a while back that the New Flowers, who are still considered an active group that are differently from the Norteños, but they still function on, they have active yards that they function on, did at one point in time, man, engage with the Bulldogs, click up for a second or two, and get off on their common enemies. But that's different. See, the Bulldogs would be willing to work hand in hand with someone who's considered an active group, to work hand in hand with the group that's considered PC and have already walked those PC yards. They cannot do it and still be functioning as a solid guy. Okay, anytime you function with someone who's non-active, you are considered what they are. Birds of a feather flock together. So as far as Fresno County Jail, Northern Riders being allowed to walk the pods, the same pods with the Bulldogs, that's a lie. That right there did never happen. And I got that on good authority from some good righteous dogs, some old school F-14er dogs from back in the days that are still in the mix, still active and still doing time, in and out of the county jail. Now, Fresno County Jail, I've never went there. So I couldn't tell you the makeup or the DNA of it, but I know just like any other county jail, they have different pods, different sections, and of course, people are segregated. Now, there are Southsiders in Fresno County, Sanger, the city of Fresno, other little sections and parts. They're Southsiders. I'm sure they function in their own pod. And of course, they're not going to put the Northern Riders with them because same thing, they're not going to function with them. And so you would think because Northern Riders do exist in the city of Fresno and they do exist in the county and on the outside areas, Merced, Modesto, Sacramento, Stockton, and these dudes do get caught up going to do crime. Maybe they go to see their old lady in Fresno, they get caught up. You have to put them somewhere. They might slip through the cracks and be placed with Bulldogs, but the Bulldogs are going to eradicate them or they're going to get off. Okay, they're just not going to function together. That ain't the way it works. Now, within the CDC system, it's a different story. Okay, now with the integration, what you have is these prison gangs are going to be the first ones integrated with the general population. And what's going to happen? Well, I'm telling you what's going to happen, what's been happening. It's not going to last too long. When they put the Bulldogs on the yard with North and South a while back, we've seen what happened. North and South got off where they were mad at immediately. Okay, it's not becoming a North and South thing or a North and Bulldog thing or a South and Bulldog thing or even a Northern Rider thing. It's now become general population inmates versus SNY inmates. And that's the way it is. Okay, that's the way it's going to be from here on out. Because at the same time, there's an old school clecha, and they say, man, you cannot function on these bad yards. I remember as a Norteño, man, before we left our reception, which the only reception I ever went to was Tracy, because I'm from the Valle, right? Merced, that was our spot. We were given a lista. We were told, hey, homie, this is a good yard, this is a bad yard. So you had to memorize what yards were good and bad. And when they rolled you up and told you, hey, it's time to go to your general population yard, yes, it was a general population yard. Yes, it was a good, solid yard, but no, it was no good for Norteño standings. So you couldn't be there. So you had a curfew of a 3-day curfew to get there, get off, garner as much information, find out who's trying to do what there, and do your thing. Now, most people that were functioning and really at a certain level and didn't want to do that and were scared to actually stay there because they knew that would fuck up their standings within the movement, got off in R&R, got off as soon as they touched down on the yard. That's what it was. So there's no way I see the Bulldogs as an active group ever allowing a PC gang or what was once considered a PC gang to function with them. Now, don't get it twisted. Things change and time changes all the time. So not to say in the future they won't come to some type of understanding, but there are so many Bulldogs in Fresno County Jail and they hold it down for their county and for their spot, that I don't see them allowing anyone who ever has the word Northern on them to fucking go in there and function. It just ain't the way it is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the homeboys are wrong. But I doubt it. Okay, now, as far as Norteños being allowed in Fresno County Jail to function at any level, they do. They do have their own pod. There are West Fresno Norteños, not very many of them, but they do go into Fresno County Jail. Everybody goes into county and does their thing. You know, you can't dictate where administration is going to put you or place you. You know, I remember being in Tracy, active Norteño, and I get my caja. They tell me, hey, it's time to go. Roll it up. Where am I going? We can't tell you. And we pull up to Jamestown Prison. When we pulled up to Jamestown Prison, I already had memorized what prisons were good, what prisons were bad. So I automatically knew that 3 yard was a non-conforming, non-functioning Norteño yard, meaning that everybody who was there were non-active Norteños. I could not stay, and I refused to stay. My mindset back then was, hey, I'm in with the homeboys. I know what my business is. I know what I got to do, what I got to take care of. So I was willing to sacrifice and do that. Now, I know some of you are saying, why? Why would you do that, Gun? I can't tell you why. Honestly, I can't sit here and tell you why. I guess it was to prove who I was to another man. I guess it was to be one of the cool guys, part of the cool guys club. I guess it was because that was my obligation to the Norte to do that. I was told, hey, homie, this is no good. So that's all I knew. Okay, it could have changed the day before, but I didn't know this. Same thing happened to me twice, and I'll explain to you. But the second time was a little different. So I go into R&R, and I've told this story before, and I had been rewriting the BNLs. The BNLs is a bad news list where a lot of Norteño names that are dropped out or no longer in good standings are on this list. And I'm sitting there, and they're bringing other dudes in from different vans, from different buses, and we're in the pod, and they bring, of course, they separate north from south and do all that, all the shenanigans. And they bring in a guy, and he's a little short, stocky dude, man, and he kicks back, and he says, oh, I'm a Norteño from Delano. I recognize his name as being on the BNL list, and they had brought him there specifically to hit that yard. He was trying to play active. I told him, hey, homie, I'm active. When I go to the yard, I'm going to get off. He's like, yeah, we'll do that. And I remember he was eating an apple. They had gave us a sack lunch right off the bus. And as soon as they had unshackled us and I'm kicking in there and he's eating his apple, I recognized him. I took flight. I got up out of there. That was my ticket out of there. And why not catch someone that was wanted in the highest degree on the BNL list? That's a fact. That was my ticket out of there. The next time they shipped me to Susanville Prison, Lassen Yard. And everything that I was hearing was that it was a bad yard. Homeboys didn't function on that yard. And I said, here we go again. I'm going to have to take flight, go do an extensive amount of time in the oil, go see ICC committee, and then they're going to ship me to a righteous yard, or I'm going to have to do it all over again. I've heard stories of Norteños being shipped to bad yard or southern yards or yards that they can't function on and just doing most of their time in the hole and accumulating more time because they couldn't rest their head. Everywhere the administration sent them was all bad, right? For them. Now, the administration knows what's good yards and bad yards, but they don't know exactly how the Norteño movement is rocking at that time and what yard is considered trash or not. So when I get there, they send me immediately to the hole, which they do that in a lot of prisons for ADSEG overflow because you have to wait till someone paroles so that there's bed space available. So I'm sitting there and come to find out the yard had just flipped and it went from a non-active yard, 50-50 yard to an active yard. And there was about 80 of us Norteños posted up in the oil waiting to be set out into the yard. And then they did. So reverting back to the Bulldogs and the Northern Riders, that is a very big rumor that's going on now that they are working hand in hand or that they are functioning together in Fresno County Jail. And I can tell you, I don't see the Bulldogs doing this. You know, a lot of people don't understand there was a lot of Bulldogs that have fell off. There's a lot of Bulldogs that have dropped out for whatever reason. Maybe they got tired of being on that yard or they fucked up with their homeboys and there's not very many places to send the dogs. So eventually they fall off and they do go to these SNY yards. And there are even a gang of Bulldogs that are no longer functioning righteously as Bulldogs, but have started another group called the Cutthroat Dogs. They're actually starting to parole to the streets and making a little bit of noise because they're able to blend in. You know what I'm saying? But I can see the Cutthroats maybe functioning with the Northern Riders, but as far as active Fresno Bulldogs functioning with Northern Riders, no. I don't see that. I've never heard of that happening. I've heard of isolated incidences where they've worked hand in hand. Maybe 1 or 2 dogs are in some county jail way up north, and maybe they run into some Northern Riders and bam, hey, let's get off, bro. Let's come together for protection of oneself. But as far as these two groups together now, That's not a fact, man. That's a rumor. And as far as them functioning in the Fresno County pods with the Fresno County, in the Fresno County jail with Bulldogs, zip, zilch, nada. It ain't happening, man. And that's coming from some real dogs that I tapped in with. And again, if I'm wrong or if they're wrong, let me know. If you know something I don't know. If you just paroled from the Fresno County jail and you've seen it with your own eyes. But I can tell you right now, man, I don't see how Bulldogs can still be respected by other active adversaries. And believe me, they might not like them. They might hate them. But they definitely respect them. Because one thing I've always been taught and told, man, and educated on is if he's your enemy and you don't respect him, then he's not your enemy. You don't give a fuck less, right? The Bulldogs definitely got their respect within the CDC and on the streets. That's a fact. No one can deny that, right? But at the same time, them working with the Northern Riders, a group that's considered by most non-active, even though nowadays there are some people who consider themselves active as Northern Riders, I can tell you right now, that is not happening. With that being said, I hope that you moose move with a purpose. Get everything that you want coming. I got fucking banger on top of banger today. I'm going to tell you about a riot not most people talk about in the prison system today between the Norteños and the blacks. And it was a monumental day because a lot of us have seen the video that's posted on YouTube. And I'm just going to tell you guys some shit today. So tune in. That'll be video number 2 on this channel. And then, of course, Super Norteño, Super Wood are cracking today on the Collective Clips. Like and subscribe. The Gun.